Hello, welcome to 30 Minutes. I'm Rick Anthony. Our guest today here at Radnor Studio 21 is a good friend, a socio-political researcher and analyst, speaker and author, Dr. Hilliard Pouncy, who has been on the show many times before. As I said, he's a good friend. We usually don't agree on very much. We spend the 30 minutes we have on the programs like this to try to find some common ground. We certainly enjoy one another's company. At least I can say that for myself.
Hey, Rick.
Welcome, Doc. How are you? As I said, always glad to have you here. And I particularly enjoy sitting across the table from you, ready to joust with you about some of the nation's news headlines.
You ready to go back at it, Rick?
Yeah, we're ready to go back at it. Take off the gloves and have at it. Here's the subject. Very recently, a survey commissioned by the Wall Street Journal and NBC News found that the values that Americans say define the national character are changing, and significantly as well as rapidly. Of concern to me is a finding that patriotism, religion, and having children are falling out of favor, particularly among the younger generation. That is a concern to me. I've thought about it. I've started to do some studying on it. Some 61% of survey respondents cited patriotism as very important to them, down from 9 percentage points about 20 years ago, while 50% cited religion, down 12 points, and the importance of having children dropped 16 points from 59% to 43%. You're a statistician. You deal with numbers and data more than I have in my career. But I think you would agree those are significant findings, and to the extent to which they represent trends is what I think we'd like to talk about today. Older people, not surprisingly, I think, had higher favorable percentages on those three subjects, that is patriotism, religion, and having children. One of the things I started to think about, and I don't want to go off on a tangent, is, again, we've both done surveys, and you know you can do almost anything you want by manipulating the numbers. But also the definition of terms is very important. And so I wondered, I don't know the answer to this, the extent to which the people conducting the survey defined what patriotism is, because obviously it can mean different things to different people. Again, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but that's one of the things that started to bother me. I just watched some of the interviews on television, and they put a microphone in front of somebody's face and say, oh, are you patriotic? Do you think you're patriotic? What does that mean to a 16-year-old or a 21-year-old or a 54-year-old or an 80-something-year-old who probably fought in a war? Patriotism means something quite different, I think, in those instances. I'm rambling now. Since it's the younger generation that's going to set the direction of this country, given those stats, I'm concerned. What are, in your opinion, the implications of the data?
Well, first, Rick, thanks for having me back. It's been a while.
But that's not because I didn't invite you.
Thanks, Rick, for having me back. It's been a while. I love this topic, and I did a little bit of homework on this study, and I just got to tell you how impressed I am with, one, the study itself, and two, the way you set the table. I think you covered the bases, and I really look forward to joining you this morning.
So we're not going to fight.
It's as I said, it's a really meaty study,
Yeah.
and just to show the amount. How important the study was to me, I did a little bit of homework, a little bit, because, turn around. And what I discovered was that I think the pollsters the Journal and NBC used for this were a team, a bipartisan team. Jeff Horowitz, a Democratic pollster, and Bill McInturff, a Republican pollster, were the two key actors behind this thing. So it's a rare, moment where in the great partisan divide, you had serious actors from both sides of that divide combining on a study and agreeing on the facts as laid out in this study, and their results are really stunning. But for me, they were stunning in a for the following reasons. There are two stories, it seems to me, at a minimum, going on in this, in what they're talking about. So if you can humor me, just let me pull back a bit and frame it from my perspective, because I liked your framing too, because you're absolutely right. Everything you said, I think just the facts are great. The story, as I saw it, was two parts. One, there are things that all Americans agree about, which is astonishing, right? And I'll outline them as I understand them. And then the second part of the study, it seemed to me, suggested that then there is a schism, and we're normally used to a partisan schism, but they were suggesting a generational schism, and I think we should all take that seriously. There is a generational schism. The issue is a couple of issues. One is, well, why is there a generational schism, and what does it mean? And so I hope over time we get to talk about it. But first things first. So there's some things in that study that it turns out everybody agrees about. And as I understood it, what everybody agreed about is that there's a value for tolerance, a value for hard work, and I forgot the third one, maybe a value for achievement or something. Let's not get bogged down.
Find it.
But they were they seem to be what you would want.
Yes.
People value hard work. There it is.
Yes.
They value hard work. They value tolerance, which surprised me, and they value financial security. No, we'll get to that one.
Okay.
They value financial security, they value hard work, and they value tolerance. If you had to ask for a vision of your society, that's the one I would ask for. That I want to work hard, that I want to have financials, I want a reward for my hard work, I want financial security for myself and my family, and I care about my neighbor. I value tolerance. So here's where, so that's there too, right? And that's not a generational divide. Everybody's on board about that. But then here's where it gets exciting. Everybody is also deeply troubled at the inability for our society to deliver on those cherished values. There's a sense that my hard work doesn't pay off. I can't secure financial security, and I think one way to think about that is, would I be able to replicate the life my parents had? The answer is increasingly, I don't think I can. And then beyond that is, well, I value tolerance. I don't think we've achieved it as a society. And so the key, the actor at the center of all that is, of course, government. Everybody's mad at the government. so we got that. And it struck me, oh yes, and then comes this thing that you were noting, which is, there's a serious increased involvement in community. So you're seeing less involvement in cherished traditional institutions, greater involvement in something vaguely termed community. Yes. So just to cut to the chase for me, yes. If I saw that and I were a policymaker with one of the candidates on either side of the partisan divide, I'd say, look, the opportunity here is for a government that isn't working for people to transform itself into an agency that is working for people. So it seems to me that if you said, what seemed to work for before, because we're talking about tradition, loss of it. Well, government used to be about big things. You know, just this summer we celebrated how it once took us to the moon. It created lasting alliances that kept us out of a tendency in the 20th century to get into a major war, world war. Government fixes infrastructure, that kind of thing. So I would suggest a government that is not only seen as working for everyone, but a government that does work for everyone. The obvious candidates on the block are things like infrastructure. Our country is literally falling apart, not just metaphorically. So, you know, let's not go to the moon. Let's have great airports and trains and stuff like that. And the bet would be that something like that seemed to work and does work is its own way an outreach to putting people on a pathway to thinking that, well, maybe the country does work. That's what I took from the study.
You didn't mention another aspect of the findings, and that was the high level of anger and anxiety in the society across generations.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
Maybe it's implicit in what you were talking about.
That's how I would answer it,
But they pulled it out.
Yeah. No, and let's just say, to get to the big point, which is, well, what's wrong, you have to, edit and trim. But yeah, that's, if you wanted to highlight that and say that it's, in addition to changes across generations, there's universal concern about a failed government to act on my payoff to hard work, my financial security, and my value for tolerance. That's a big deal. And people, I think one headline called it a raging boil.
Yes.
There you go.
But you singled out government. Again, maybe you didn't mention the other institutions that have failed, virtually all of them, in almost every aspect of life. Religion, education, business, certainly, science, healthcare. All of those systems have, in the opinions of many people, they're either broken or they're not delivering on the promise, or they favor one group over the other. And that is generational for the most part. What about all of that? Again, if I understood you correctly, you seem to be saying, if we could just get government to work the way it's supposed to, in the interest of the people, that would help to fix the problem. I guess it would help, but all by itself is not going to fix anything, if only because of the, not mentioned, but I think we can infer it from what is in the data, the high level of skepticism and cynicism among all generations about any attempt on the part of government, for example. Suppose there was, and as you know, there have been attempts to allocate large sums of money to fixing this country's infrastructure because, as you said, the bridges are falling apart, everything is falling, the highways, the roadways, and so on. There would immediately, almost reflexively be, oh, wait a minute, somebody's got their hand in somebody else's pocket, because they always do. And so if there are $14 million that have just been allocated to some contractor to do a project, I want to know, I want to see in today's world, I want to see the contract, I want the history of the principles, I want to see where the money's going, when it's paid, to whom it's paid, and so on. Then the next step is, well, okay, we'll set up a watchdog agency. And then we find out that that's as corrupt as the government that created it in the first place. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
We have, and this again goes across, no, that's not true. It does go across generations, but you and I can, at least I can remember, there was a day when I did trust the government. And there may have been, as there probably was, corruption and ineptitude and all that other stuff. But to some extent, it was more benign than it is today. And maybe it was also because of the news media. I wasn't aware of it because it wasn't being reported 24 hours every single day. What am I saying? I guess what I'm saying is that your remedy, and I know I'm oversimplifying it, but your remedy, regrettably, I don't think is going to work, because we seem to be, the generations seem to be digging in and entrenched, intractable in their beliefs, because it's now becoming ideology that government is bad, government doesn't work, turn the government over to us, the move towards socialism in this country, even though I don't think most of the people who espouse it really understand what the word means, particularly among the young people, because they never lived it before. And in spite of the fact that the people in Iceland and Finland and the Scandinavian countries, Denmark and so on, the Netherlands, where it purportedly has worked in the past, are now coming out and saying it didn't. Was it Finland that just declared bankruptcy because of the healthcare system?
It might be Iceland.
No, it was Finland.
Is it Finland?
Yeah.
Well, pick one.
Iceland we tried to buy.
Right. No, that was Greenland.
Iceland.
No, we tried to buy Greenland.
Yeah. Again, is there anything in what you understand what I'm saying?
Actually,
I'm more skeptical than you are.
Yeah,
more pessimistic.
I do. I get it. So remember as a kid they had this toy it was a tube. It's usually made out of some kind of twine.
You put your fingers in,
you put your
couldn't
finger
get
in
out.
there, and if you pulled hard, you couldn't get it out.
Yeah.
And the goal was to do something counterintuitive,
Yes.
right? So let's use that as a metaphor.
Good metaphor. Yeah.
And and so where I'm going on this is that, look, well, you're actually right. So it's just mind-blowing to me that this is happening. The logic of let's do something, which is what I was going with, especially if it's big and inclusive, is undermined by what you rightly note is a big distrust of government. And one of the reasons government is distrusted is because in order to function as a government, the people involved in government are usually more concerned about their partisan short-term advantage. So it's not simply that people would distrust government in some naive way. It's that the leaders that we have would encourage that, because the game that's operative now is the, well, who would benefit? How would that work? Would my side be permanently reduced in some way? So getting there to any goal, I mean, the magic of the way I was thinking is any goal would do. You just want government to be larger than us, than government be seen as creating some larger purpose that helps my society, and then paradoxically helps me, because the real problem is I don't feel financially secure and I don't think my hard work is paying off. But if the mechanism for doing anything are people who, just as in this conversation we were noting now, the first thought would be suspicion, distrust, et cetera, that's another conversation how you would deal with that. The possibilities are that the sense that emerged in that study for what people already feel is a greater attachment to community. The sense of my community matters to me is up in that survey. It's one of the few things that's climbed. The older institutions, you're right, their distrust of them has increased, especially around religion. Patriotism sounded to me like a more interesting, poorly understood idea, but we can talk about it if you want. And so the question is, communities up, distrust of traditional institutions down, and let's just pick one that I can control a little bit better than some of the others. Interest in starting a family is down. Okay, and so you could argue, well, what would be an efficient way of answering all that? One is that the system doesn't work, right? I regret talking like that. The system doesn't work, but inequality is much higher, and historically high, going into this current century, and the feeling that my hard work doesn't pay off for my financial security isn't some notion; it's a reality for most of us. The ability to make our hard work pay off is unequal. There's an unequal return on effort, and the sense then that I can't afford a family would make it rational to say I value starting a family less. Well, or to put it a different way, I probably value marriage, etc., but the practicality of starting a family is less for me, and that might be expressed as, well, maybe having a kid isn't as important to me. The optimistic part of me would say, well, if I knew that my financial security was stronger or higher, I would put a bet on my interest, my perception, my interest in having a kid would rise. It's an interactive game. It's a complex game, but it's pretty commonsensical. If I don't have money in my pocket, I don't see how my hard work translates into a living wage. My student debt is high. If I'm lucky enough to get into college, my earnings are way low, and I can also perceive a big gap between others in the system doing better, that kind of thing, then sure, I might make choices that would come out in that study. And the easiest one to look at is my decision to have a kid. And in a way, you almost think that's a good thing. If I don't think I can afford a kid, then my decision not to have a kid is eminently rational.
I don't disagree with anything you've said, but I come at it slightly differently. And this is a generational thing. I believe, we've had conversations with my grandkids and with their friends and so on. It's part of the problem is what the media has done and what we have done, one generation to the younger generation, in valuing material things and setting an expectations that you don't have to start down here. In fact, we don't want you to start down there. We want you to start up here. And every television show that you watch, that goes into housing or cars or anything else, and there's this phrase that advertisers use. It drives me crazy. But they work it into the copy or they complete an ad with, because you deserve it. You don't deserve it. Because you deserve it. And the other phrase that bothers the heck out of me is what politicians use, both sides, too often, and that's not who we are. What the hell does that mean? When Obama or Bush or any of the others stood up and said, because they opposed something, because they were trying to make a point, because they were trying to get into my emotions and draw me in, that's not who we are. Well, who are we? Somebody define who we are. According to this, we're a society that is bifurcated, that is getting really angry, anxious, with no way, no hope of bringing these parties back together again. We're headed for something that is cataclysmic, if you believe what these guys are saying. At least that's my opinion. Something has to happen. Somebody has to step up, and I don't think it's going to be government. I don't think we can put religion back together again. I don't think we can put education back together again so that those institutions have the credibility they used to have. And I agree, it was almost a naivete. I accept these institutions because of the collar in the case of religion, or because the teacher is held on a high pedestal because they're a teacher. All of that stuff. Again, I'm rambling, but you understand. I'm concerned and I'm pessimistic because there are so many aspects to this, and I don't see how we can get our arms around all of them.
Well,
does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. And in the old days of being on your show, this is where I'd say I don't agree with you. You know,
yeah.
Get the kick in.
But those were the fun days.
Yes, and don't we miss them? But you know, this is actually serious stuff, because you have grandkids, I have kids, that kind of stuff, and we care deeply. But here's where I do part company with you, although I actually I wouldn't say I share, but I can appreciate your radical, I would even call it radical skepticism, because unless you could show either of us some pathway out of this is really bad stuff.
Yeah.
This is scary. So where we part company goes something like this. When you were shifting blame to suggest, well, we shouldn't tell people to expect much, that's where I part company with you. Now, I listened carefully to what you said, so please give me the same. So where I part company is, the engine of growth in this society, at least as I understood it, was you worked hard and you were rewarded. That for the second half of the 20th century, there was this magic carpet ride. You would work hard. Your earnings would be commensurate at least in your mind, with your effort. Right. Most of us were at the same level. You know, there weren't these large differences, and you know, every couple of years you'd get a new car. You worked hard. You could probably buy a house, et cetera, et cetera. And so the effort to reward was in a certain balance, and under those terms, it would be easy. Let's just make it clear. It would be very easy to trust most things in your life. Your schooling would yield your job, your participation in your community through traditional means would create a sense of belonging, a tolerance perhaps for others, efficacy, positive feelings, and a measurable difference in your life. You could look around you and say, it's not an illusion. This is a good place, and I am a good person. Now, you take away any of that, in real ways, right? Real ways. Companies, when they bust up, they throw away your pension. I mean, we could go into a litany of all the many things that have gone wrong. And in replacement of that, you have civic leaders who tell you that the solution to all of this is something like a bromide. I'll put my prejudices on the table. And the bromide might be, if you were a better American, if those people weren't here, if too many people didn't do what you and I think they should do. Now, that's a very different civic lesson from we Americans are putting forth our best effort to show the world that things are important and we will achieve them. We will go to the moon, which was the craziest thing any political leader. Before Kennedy said that, he said, why does Rice play Texas? Which was really funny and absurd. And so he said, so why don't we go to the moon? And we were such an amazing society that, by God, we did it. I don't know, was it 40, 50 years ago? This summer we did it. And so that is a different country. And to then say, well, if you don't have all of that we had before, and then why shouldn't you actually be surprised that we have what we have now? So again, to circle it all, to bring it all back home, the idea then that you don't have visionary leaders, you don't have inspiring civic authorities who can move us past this, no, let's win by making the other side less than they already are. Let's denigrate our fellow citizens because I can't really deliver a job that gives you a living wage. That seems to me to be, I don't know, a pathway we might want to explore. And that's what I got out of that study, which said the people in our country, they actually feel more attached to their community. They are exploring, and it's differing by generations, activities that replace things in their lives. I would argue, and I'm going to take a big leap here, Rick. I'm going to give you something for your show, because I heard your ratings were down. What do you have, 10 now, or is it 9? I'm going to give you a big one.
We've got a minute left, so
I'm going to give you a big one.
All right.
The difference by generation is that the youngsters are prepared to be attached to community. We have to find the abilities to make effort once again equal a measurable reward. It seems to me, fairly simple, and it's a brilliant study. I was glad you brought me in to talk about it, and what it did for me is it gave me hope. It gave me something to fear, but it also showed me that there was reason to hope.
I wish I could share your optimism. I don't, and I hope I'm wrong.
Let's hope.
I hope we're wrong, because we're better than that.
Oh, good for you.
And you deserve better.
Good for you. The kind of leadership our country needs.
As always, a pleasure to have you. My guest today has been Dr. Hilliard Pouncy, a good friend, obviously a bright light, and is able to talk about just about anything, right or wrong. But his convictions are always strong. Until next time, I'm Rick Anthony. This is 30 Minutes. Take very good care of yourselves. We're out.